session. My name is Jeff Jones, and I am with the Logstown Associates, and I'm Vice President of the organization. The Logstown Associates, we started in like 1987. Father Edward Rozak, he moved to this area, and he had a big interest in history. And he likes to study, the history of a particular area. In our area, he came and studied about the Indians in our area, who was here, and so on. He found out that there's a place called Logstown. So through research and stuff, he got very interested in that, and he actually formed this group called the Logstown Associates. And from that, the goal of Logstown, I'm going to talk about where it was actually located, and so on. Our goal, it's changed a little bit now over the years, but our goal is to actually purchase the land and where it's located, at least a portion of it, not all of it, but a portion of it, and build a building or do something to promote Logstown, talk about Logstown, say here's where it was, here's what happened there, and so on. But as we get into it, I'll tell you exactly where it is. You'll be able to see how that particular goal won't necessarily happen. We still have a goal or the ambition of getting a building or something. So we have you go right inside the door here, there's a diorama. We had that big those figurines in there, if you looked at it, they're all hand painted. And it kind of depicts what Logstown may have looked like back in the history. So with things like that, we have excessive books from Father Rozak. He has passed on. He had all these research books and papers that he wrote. So we have a lot of, some artifacts we want to put somewhere on display for people. So we want to continue the history of Logstown. And you'll see why we feel it's so important what Logstown was in this area. So, Logstown was in existence from basically 1725 about 1758. And how Logstown come to be was the Delaware and the Shawnee were on the eastern side of the state, around Philly, that area. Well, they weren't getting along with people, and people kind of pushing around, pushing. So they started migrating west. They got to this area, and they decided to make a village or settlement here, and so on. So that's when the original, there was like Delaware and Shawnee there that migrated over to this area. Where Logstown was located is, if you're from the area, it's down in Harmony Township near Ambridge. If you're heading towards Pittsburgh on 65, you come to the big sheets. Across from sheets is a dealership that they just put in this year real recent. That's where Logstown was located. The original Logstown was actually located down along the river. And they would actually get the wood drifting down the river, and they would build their lodges from or whatever. And then they did move up on top, and they settled there. That's kind of the new Logstown we talk about. And that's why if you look at diorama, it's the way it is. You have the river, and down here then you have it's sloped, and it comes up on top and flattens out. So that's where they started from. And another group that lived there also, the Seneca, well, the ones that lived down in this area along the river actually were called Mingos. Sometimes different, it depends if you're talking to the English, you're talking to the French, you're talking to the Indian. Same thing, but different name. So, kind of depending on who you talk to. At Logstown, the Indians called the village Pow-Wow. That was the Indian name for it. my pronunciation is probably, I do the best I can, let's put it that way. The English, or the French called it Chinaka, and the English called it Chenango and Logstown. All those names, but it was the same area. Okay. What they lived in is what's called a log house. Because the Seneca, they were part of the Iroquois Confederacy. I don't know if you was out here prior and they talked about the Iroquois. The Iroquois Confederacy basically was, it started out with 5 different tribes and a 6th was added. And they lived in New York, they migrated down this way and so on. And they consisted of Seneca, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Mohawk. Then the Tuscaroras from down south joined them also. So, and the Iroquois basically, they lived in long houses, and it could be 30, 40 feet long, 50, whatever. It was a pretty long structure. It had a domed roof to it. And inside, the center was open, but inside it was divided off. And each family, there could be 20 different families in there. And that's where they lived. And the person in charge, it was one large family, they were all related. But who's in charge of that longhouse? You have to have one person in charge. And that was the eldest woman of that family. It was matriarchal, what it was called. The woman was in charge of what went on in there. So that's another reason we call it Logstown. It kind of gets its name. So in this area, people started the white man started migrating to this area around 1670. And the first white man was the French. They come in the area, they liked it, they liked trading with the Indians, and so on. You'll find, as I go along, it goes back and forth between the French and the English. Both want to be friends with the Indians, so if they went to war, that the Indians would back them and not the other group, and vice versa. So there's things that happen that affected the English, there's things that happened that affected the French. So it's a constant battle back and forth as far as who's going to be, who's going to be friends with the Indians. And because of that, Logstown being a trading, a lot of traders come down the river, they would stop and trade their goods there. So of course, both sides wanted, their goods traded at Logstown because it's such a prominent area. Then around 1700, like I said, the Iroquois Confederacy come into play. They started migrating down and they settled in Logstown also. And so at Logstown, there's 2 main chiefs that lived there. One was Sheridan, who was called the Half King, and he was a Seneca chief. And the other, his name was Scariati. He was Oneida. Again, it comes into play, depends on who you talk to, their names will change. Scariati you may know by a different name, and that is Manakatusa. And that's where Monaca got its name from Manakatusa. So that's, So things were going okay. And then in 1744, they had a treaty over at Lancaster. And at that treaty, there was people from the Indian tribes were there, but people from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. Now we think of those states, you think of the borders that we have now. Back then, it was totally different. Like Virginia, really, they claimed land that went up, clear up to Erie, up the whole western side of what's now Pennsylvania. So there was a battle over, okay, who owns the land? So the French, the English, whatever, what state, Pennsylvania, you know. So there's a lot of controversy. At the Treaty of 1744, the Indians thought that here's how the treaty read: you had land this far to the Allegheny Mountains. The French thought, no, 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 we have land clear over past the mountain to the setting sun. The English thought differently of what they had. Pennsylvania, Maryland, they tried to settle it in this treaty. They did settle that the white man could go beyond the Allegheny Mountains and set up trading and so on. Well, that opened it up for all the white men to start to come across and migrate to the area even more so, which created more problems. One problem was the Indians liked the English more than the French because they liked the English trading goods better because they were better quality and they were cheaper, and they got better money per se for their furs from the English than they did the French. So, but then of course the French, no, 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 you got to trade with us. So it was a constant battle. They had the governor of Pennsylvania said, we got to keep peace with the Indians. So they got some people together and decided we're going to send somebody over and got to keep peace with the Indians, got to make them happy, and sent like 200 pounds worth of goods. Yes, basically it's a bribe to the Indians. Say, hey, be good with us, you know, instead of them other guys. And they sent a guy named Conrad Weiser in 1748 over to Logstown trying to settle things down. And he did have goods with him and so on. In 1748, when Conrad Weiser got to Logstown, he met with the chiefs and so on, and all the different Indian tribes that were there. At the time, it wasn't just 3 different tribes. There's a good variety, a good mixture of tribes living together at Logstown. And at that treaty, it's kind of the first census ever taken of the Indians in the area. And what they did, how did they count it? You know, they were counting the fighting men, not the women or anything else, just the fighting men that was living at Logstown. They made bundles of sticks of 10. And that's how they counted how many people there were for each tribe. They turned in so many bundles, and that's how they counted it. So at that time in 1748, from the census they took, there was 163 Seneca, or Bingo, which they were called. There were 100 Wyandots. Some of these tribes actually came from Ohio. This was actually called the Ohio Valley that they were fighting over. But what we call Ohio now, there's some tribes from there that come over to Logstown also. Wyandots were one of them. There's 100 of those. The Shawnee, there's 162. The Biscayne, there was 40. The Mohawk, 74. Mohegans, 15. Onondaga, 35. Cayuga, 20. Oneida, 15. And the Delaware, 65. So you can see there's a pretty good mixture of different tribes there. And that added up to 789 fighting men. Also at that time, September 1st, 1748 is the first time that the British flag was ever raised in this area. So that was now 48 rather. In 1749, of course, the French traders come in and they see a British flag flying. They're not very happy. So down comes that flag. And the Captain Celeron de Bentonville sent detachments of soldiers from Canada down through this area trying to claim this land for the French. And they come down the Oswego, the Allegheny, and the Ohio River is detachment of French. And what they did, they had laid plates that they buried in the ground. And on that plate, basically it said, "We claim this land for the King of France, and that this is French property that you are on." So, as they come to different tributaries of body, of water coming into those rivers, that's where they put these laden plates. So they come all the way down here to the Ohio and so on. August 9th and 10th of 49, the captain finally reached Logstown. Seeing the British flag, what's his first order? Bring it down. So then, in 1750, Christopher Guest worked with a company called the Ohio Company. They were out of Virginia, and he was sent up to the Logstown area, survey the area, and when he got up to Logstown, November of 1750, he noticed that there was log buildings there, and so on. What the French did when they come in, they started building buildings for, actually log houses, like log cabins that we know of today. They started building those for the Indians to what? Influence the Indians to the French side. Again, back and forth. So he noticed that when he went up there. Then in 1752, they had another powwow or another treaty meeting at Logstown to ratify the Treaty of 1744, trying to settle, figure out, and so on. And the Indians denied the English claim to any land west of the mountains. So the Indians said, "No, you do not have this land. It's not yours. It's our land." Especially the Iroquois, they thought it was their property, their land, because they got the land from conquest. They were fierce fighters, and because they, through battle and everything, they take claim to the land. The Iroquois, they weren't just up in New York or Pennsylvania, they were in Ohio, they were south of us. I mean, they covered a very, very large area. So, with that, in 1753, the governor of Canada, the general of Canada, Governor General Duquesne, sent a captain or a general down, General Duquesne, down the Ohio to build forts along the way. He built a fort at Prescott, LaBeouf, which is south of Prescott, up in Erie, Venango, which is Franklin, PA, that area, and down at the point, Pittsburgh is. They saw that, three rivers coming together there, and, they figured that'd be an excellent place for a fort. So he's having all these forts constructed along the way. And his goal was to connect Canada with, all the way down to the Mississippi. That's why he wanted all these forts to connect and protect their land and so on. Then we come to, in 1753, this is a big one. And a good reason that we want to preserve Logstown, in that, you can see the history already. But in 1753, on November 24th, there's a guy that came up to Logstown with a little bit of significance. The governor of Virginia, Governor Dinwiddie, got Christopher Guest again, former expedition, and a 21-year-old guy by the name of George Washington. His mission was to leave Virginia, come up through Pennsylvania, stop at Logstown, get an Indian guide, and go up to Fort LaBeouf and tell the French to get off the English property, on English land. So, they formed that. November 24th, Washington shows up at Logstown right here in Beaver County. And he met with the chief. He had to wait because Lieutenant Sheridan, the half-king, was out hunting. So he had to wait, delayed a couple days and so on. Until we finally got back, they talked. Lieutenant Sheridan ended up being their guide. Get up to Fort LaBeouf. Now, if you're from Western PA, our weather in November, December is not the nicest weather in the world. Back then, rain, snow, cold, that's what they fought the whole way. So they left Logstown and they went on up towards Venango. They went through a place called Murdering Town, and it was just south of Franklin, basically. They went up to Venango, met with the French general there in charge, and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drop all, I have no control of that. You have to go to Fort LaBeouf and talk to the guy up there. So they said, all right. Well, off they went with the group they had. It wasn't a real large group, but they headed up to Fort LaBeouf. They got to Fort LaBeouf. They had to wait on the general there. Finally met with him, and Washington presented himself the best he could because it was a hard trip. It did rain basically the whole time, bitter cold. He did get out the vest he had to wear, dressed up, got in front of him, gave the post from Governor Dinwiddie saying, you're on our property, our land, on our land, we want you out. Well, the French reaction was, ha ha ha, you get out, we're not leaving, you're on our property. So, gave him a note and everything to take back to the governor. At that point, Washington and Guest, they made a decision. Their horses were pretty weak by that point. The men were pretty exhausted from the weather and just the trip in itself. So Washington and Guest left LaBeouf and went one way. They sent their troops a different way. They separated. So Guest and Washington come back down to Venango. At that point, they picked up, Lieutenant Sheridan left them up at Fort LaBeouf. They picked up a new guide at Venango and told him, here's where we want to go, basically down to the point. And so off they went. Well, the Indian guide they got, he stayed out in front of them quite a bit. And so they're trudging along, and they're guessing Washington going, slow down, we need to rest. No, we don't want to rest. Just follow me. Come on. And kept pushing them. They were going along, and at one point, the Indian that was out in front of them stopped, turned, took his rifle down, took a shot at Washington. Luckily, he missed. Off he goes. The guy takes off. So Washington came out, checked where they were at, and found out here they weren't being led very true to where they might be. He didn't miss the guiding. Got back on trail, and finally, it's like December 30th, they got down to the Allegheny River. They were hoping it would be frozen solid so they could walk across the river. On the other side, they were going to go visit a chief there. Her name was Queen Aliquippa. And she was located basically in McKees Rocks. And Aliquippa is actually named after her. So, they couldn't cross the river because it wasn't frozen. So they spent the day building a raft. Once they got the raft built, they got on it, and they started to cross the river. Washington was out front with a pole, trying to get his raft across. Big hunk of ice come down, hit the raft, and where's Washington go? In the Allegheny River. guest goes over, reaches over, pulls him out of the river. So Washington almost died twice in western Pennsylvania. And at the time there was an island in the middle of the Allegheny. They spent the night there, and then the river did freeze enough that they could walk across the rest of the way. Went down, saw Queen Aliquippa, and then went on back down to Virginia. Made his report, and so on. In the meantime, you know, there is still fighting going up in this area, and the land. Fort Duquesne was there. Of course, the British were fighting the Indians at Lancaster, and they started coming across. General Forbes, he had the Battle of Bush Run, and he ends up in Fort Duquesne, captured Fort Duquesne in 1758. There's still stuff going back and forth between 53, 50, you know, that whole time period, the same type of stuff was going on. And of course, the battle between the French and the English got worse and worse. And finally, when the British come over and captured Fort Duquesne, it spelled the end of Logstown. At that point, it wasn't, I mean, a lot of people came there and traded their goods and so on. And at that point, once it got captured, it started dwindling away. The settlers there, the Indians that lived there started dispersing. And, you know, by 1760, there's like nobody at Logstown. Maybe one or two people, you know, very, very few. It was around 62 range. Washington actually went back through this area, stopped where Logstown was, and, you know, there's nothing there. So we feel it's pretty important. You know, there's a lot of history there of what happened just right here. That's why as Logstown, we are trying to preserve, you know, the site, the area, people about Logstown, what it was, and so on. We feel it's very important. The important thing is, in 1917, there's a group of people that applied to the government and so on for Logstown and get a grant, buy the property, and do something with Logstown. In fact, that basically was going to happen. They were getting ready to sign the grant for that group to buy Logstown, the property itself, the land itself. Well, something big happened in 1917. World War I started. Once that happened, everything went kaput. You know, no grants or anything else, because it all went into the war. So if that wouldn't have happened, we would have had this property way back then, and who knows where we would have been. So, you know, there's a pretty good history with Logstown and what happened there. And that's why we as a group are trying to preserve that. The information that I have, you can go on the website, you can Google Logstown, you get a lot of information. There's some articles out there about Logstown. Some of the information I got out of this book. It's about all the Indians in Pennsylvania. It talks about Logstown, quite a bit of different groups that lived here, so that was very useful. Another real good book. This is Indian place names, all the places in Pennsylvania. You can look it up. You know, like Hopewell, Swickley, Beaver. You know, they all have ties into Native Americans, names, and so on. It talks about Logstown. Pretty extensive area group, whatever, you know, thing on Logstown in here. Real good. I got a lot of that information just from this book itself. You know, it's a couple pages just from Logstown. But you can look up all kinds of stuff. So this is a pretty neat book to get info. This, I don't know, probably less than 5 years this come out. It's about Fort McIntosh, which was located in Beaver, Fort Pitt, because after Duquesne, they kept Duquesne, they changed the name to Fort Pitt. And then also a group on Logstown. Neat little book. Washington and Guest took made their journey. They kept a journal of what happened on their trip, where they were, and so on. This is a duplicate of Washington's journal on his trip to Fort LaBeouf. So that's pretty good. This one is not just locked 1753. Christopher Guest has a bunch of other ones in here too. Times he was up in this area, whatever. His journal, there is this book. So a lot of information out there. This here is a pretty recent book also. And this is strictly on the trip from of Washington from down in Virginia up to Fort LaBeouf. This is a pretty good book. This is the adult version. This is the exact same story, children's version. So, it's a little easier to read for the, for the younger people and so on. And but it tells the exact same story about Washington. So that's kind of the history of Logstown. If you have some questions, I'll try to answer. Oh, he's adjusting. I think he's raising his hand.
No, just
okay.
Do you happen to know what tribe Aliquippa was from?
Queen Aliquippa, she was, I think she was Seneca. I don't remember real sure off the top of my head. Maybe.
The only reason I asked is because I was curious as to why she wouldn't have been in Logstown as compared to being where she was at further down.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to bring. I'm glad you asked that question in that there is some controversy over what side the river was Logstown on. It was on the north side. But there is proof and evidence that, some people say, well, Logstown was on the other side, the Aliquippa side of the river, not the Ambridge side. Well, they're kind of both. They do have proof, they have, but I think the one on the Aliquippa side was later, into the 1800s more so. I think they called it Logstown, New Logstown, or Logstown still. You have to remember also, at the time, the Ohio River wasn't real deep. They would travel back and forth across. So they could live over there, they could travel across the river and plant their corn or grow their crops over there, or, travel back and forth. So, but there is proof, they have documents of people's names, property owner, that type of thing, and they called it Logstown.